a permanent buy down. So you could permanently buy down the interest rate, and instead of lowering the price, ask for the seller's concession. Why would you only want to do it for 2 years?
Well, let's say you paid $5,000 to save $100 a month. That basically is 50 months of saving $100, right? So you're going to save money. That's your break-even point. Then you start making money after the 50th payment.
So you're betting the interest rate's going to drop.
Well, you're actually
in 50 months.
Well,
24 months.
The 2-1 buy down, you save all the interest in the first 2 years, then you're at your normal rate. So let's say today you're at 7% fixed for 30 years. Year 1, you get a discount to 5%. Year 2, you get a discount to 6%. Year 3, you're up to 7%. The difference would be you're not breaking even. You're breaking even in 2 years or less, as opposed to 50 payments. So if you're what you're betting on is that rates are going to go down. So in the first 50 months, you refinance and get rid of that 7% rate anyways.
So how much you save in the first year?
Well, on a $300,000 house, you're going to save 2% of these $6,000. Then you're
so there's $500 a month.
Well, but yeah, you save.
Well,
Yeah, I mean in interest basically, you're going to save $6,000 in year 1, $3,000 in year 2. So your $4,500 that would cost would save you $9,000. It costs about half what you're going to save. So if you're going to save $10,000, it costs you $5,000. Save $9,000, cost you $4,500.
But if you bought that down on use your 300.
So $100 a month in interest, you're going to save $36,000 over 30 years, but you're only going to save a couple $1,000 a year, or $1,200 a year, right? $100 a month in interest.
Yeah.
So when do you actually start saving?
No, you're saving a whole percent, so you're saving $3,000 a year.
Well, no, I just said $100 a month. To save yourself a whole percentage point is going to cost way more than $5,000.
Well, it's about a point per quarter. Percent.
So $3,000 per quarter, so $12,000 to save 1%. Now you're talking about a long time, so your break even is way down the road.
Yeah, but if you're getting the seller to pay it instead of knocking it off the price.
If you're getting the seller to pay it, that's good. If you're never going to refinance, you're going to keep that house forever, it's better to pay a lower rate over time. But if you think rates might go down, or you think...
Well, even if they do go down, you refinance it anyway.
Even if they do go down, you refinance anyway, but why did you spend that money for long-term savings? I guess if you could save $10,000 up front versus $10,000 over 10 years or 8 years, whatever, 100.
Yeah, but you're also buying down, you're creating more equity as well. So when you go to refinance, you're not having to refinance as high, hypothetically.
Both right. Well, so if you're going to pay less interest, then your monthly payment is going to be static. So yeah, the 2-1 buy down in the first year, your payment's going to be lower. And it's going to creep up in year 2 and then creep up more in year 3. If you made the normal payment, you would also build more equity that way. But paying the rate, you're just saving money in interest. The principal is going to be a similar.
Yeah.
So why not combine the two?
Combining the two is ideal.
Get the homeowner to give you the concession and do the 2-in-1. Pay less, pay even less. No, but I'm serious though. Pay even less.
Well, the problem comes.
How about we just pay nothing for the house?
Well, believe me, they would love to do that.
The problem comes is that the regulators have set a limit on how much can be spent in fees on a loan.
Gotcha.
So in Indiana, that max, including all your closing costs and fees, is like 4.7%. The actual points and closing and underwriting fee and the actual fees is capped at 3% with most lenders. They use a high cost calculator, so you can't unlimited spending on points. So doing both is ideal, but if you had to choose between one of the two, My recommendation would be to save it all up front, and then 2 years from now, I think maybe at the end of next year, they start lowering rates. Maybe third or fourth quarter next year.
Of 23.
Yeah, once they realize they've just brought the economy to a standstill and people start getting laid off, politicians are gonna go with the wind and start lowering rates down.
Are there regulations on how much you can put in your escrow account?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah, so how much they can take from you, but are you able to put more in?
They can only hold 2 months cushion in escrow.
Okay.
As a cushion, they can be wrong and hold too much for the taxes, but they have to correct it.
So you have taxes prepaid. So like if they
You
come
can
to the
pay your own
table,
tax, yeah.
well, I mean, what I'm saying is, if you wanted to do the 2-in-1 and you're going to run up against what you're legally allowed to do, and you're going to get, let's say you get a $7,500 concession, can you take the $7,500 and prepay taxes for X amount of time?
I don't know if you can pay taxes for a seller. That's a real estate question, I think. But
Yeah, we did that when they went from that in Indiana, from that made-up assessment to the market assessment. That was common for about a year, where they paid the next installment of taxes rather than to the closing date. They actually paid the next, and that's also more common in commercial, to pay the taxes.
the regulators and lenders have put a limit in on how much a seller can give them. So
If you were going to do that, I wouldn't do it that way. I would actually, in the purchase agreement, ask them to, instead of that box we mark for
Yeah.
proration, I would say, mark the first box and say, you're paying,
you pay the taxes.
you pay the taxes.
Yeah, you can negotiate that on a real estate contract.
And that probably would not fall under his purview, so it wouldn't be counted in
Yeah.
points and fees and all that, because that would be a real estate negotiation.
The seller concessions can be allocated however you want, but ultimately it just reduces the cash they have to bring to the table. That's the idea.
So what is the cap right now?
Conventional is 3%, FHA is 6%.
Gotcha.
And when you say it as a percentage, I mean, it actually sounds like not that much. You know, you think,
But it's,
300,
Well, I mean, yeah, on 300 grand, you're looking at $18,000.
and that hurts. But if I say it's just 3%, okay, him 3%, that's no big deal.
so is there a way to back calculate the optimal amount to be able to talk to a realtor representing one of your clients and say, look, if you can ask for all of these things, this is the most you can ask for. This is the best case scenario. If you can get all of this, this is the absolute nuts of where we can go with things. Is there a way to back calculate that and give them that info?
Yeah, I mean, you would just say, ask for the max. So on a $300,000 house, ask for 3%. That's the max.
As a concession.
As a concession, we'll buy your house for 300, but we want X, or we'll buy it for 309, but we want 9 grand, whatever you want.
Yeah, but what are you trying to do?
Well, we've used that when it's a situation where the person doesn't have the money, or they're tight on funds, or
Well,
it creates a borrower out of a non-borrower.
that's what basically that's what I was telling the agents the other day, my agents. If you use the concession instead of lowering the price, it does change the amount of money they have to bring. Lowers the amount of money they have, because the loan's good for 300. You knock the purchase price to 290, you still got to pay closing costs or whatever. But if you can get concessions, then you don't have to pay closing costs, because you can add those concessions and spread it out in those closing areas.
Now back to the 2-1 buy down, there is a difference for that with the lender we have offering it now. It has to be seller concessions versus points for the term of the loan. That can be bought by the
Seller has to be a seller.
has to be a concession. And why, I don't really understand fully that, but
It would affect the APR, wouldn't it?
they're modifying the loan. They're modifying the first 2 years of the loan. And by the way,
So even if you pitch that 2-1 to our buyer, and the buyer says, I want to use the 2-1 arm, the 2-1 buy down, this vote, the seller still has to be on board with it.
The seller has to agree to that concession, yes.
I think that's a better way to go right now anyway, is seller concessions instead of lowering purchase price.
Well, let's say rates go up to 8%, and then next year they start to lower rates. It went up really fast. I mean, within less than 12 months, we've gone from 3% to 8%.
Yeah.
How fast they will go down, that's a good question.
It's like gasoline, man. They're never going to go. It'll jump 30 cents in a day. It takes 4 weeks to get back to it.
So I would want to put a lot of thought into whether I would want the 2-1 buy down or the long-term savings. But I think, frankly, the expense of buying the rate down is just, it's very expensive. So I would probably look at the 2-1 buy down. I'd use those extra dollars in the first couple of years, pay the principal down. That's going to save you an interest. And
Is there a way that Five Stones could produce a document or something like that you could explain both sides of that, hand it to a lay person so that they would understand those options more effectively? Because I think
they've got those already. I think they've got something that they could use.
I think what today's person wants me to do is say, I've done the math and you need to do the 2-1 buy down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of them, like you said, are looking to you to be the professional.
When I bought my first house, I thought, oh man, this is great. I own a house. I'm going to be here forever, and I got my stamp on the world. And then 2 years later, I'm like, well, I sure would like to have another full bathroom. So I think don't you think when a first-time home buyer is buying a house, they think mistakenly that's a permanent house? Most people move 7 to 10 years, but
I don't think people think that anymore.
well,
No, for the same reason we were talking last week between relationship and transactional. Your transactional client is not coming into it using their heart. They're using their head. They think it's right now. Either I'm going to move up into a bigger house or I'm not going to be here forever, but I don't want to go live in an apartment or I don't want to pay someone rent and pay twice what it's going to cost me to have my own place. I don't think people look at it as a 30-year thing anymore. Now, maybe they do look at it as a 7-year, 10-year thing, where I'm going to be here until the kids finish school, and then I'm going.
yeah, that's what.
But I don't think anyone people use a 30-year loan because of the price,
I think
not the
that's what I
cost.
meant to say. Maybe I didn't say that. I'm thinking people, maybe they mistakenly think it's going to be permanent, but nobody stays in the house more than 7 or 10 years is what the NAR tells us, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to stay in the house 7 years, you don't just want to break even, you want to save money. So if I break even in year 4 and save money for 3 years, what the hell?
But with a 2-1 buy down, you're only saving money 2 years, but you're saving more.
You're saving more, yeah. So it's all front loaded.
Oh, well, I think those are all good answers, and I think it's going to be dependent, like you're saying, 2-1 buy down is going to require the seller to participate.
Yeah. Well, this is why you got to get to know your clients, because everybody's different. If somebody's buying a house, they intend to hold and they can rent and they know they're going to move on. Every situation's different, so you really got to get to know your client so you make the right recommendation.
Well, that's not what I'm proposing. Because I don't think that level of relationship is coming down the road.
But
I think it's going to be more disconnected between the agent and the buyer, and the agent and the seller.
I agree with you, but I also think that a regulator is going to tell you that you better make the right recommendation to protect your client. And the problem won't come until after the fact when they say, oh my gosh, you could have saved me 10 grand in interest. I'm suing you.
Yeah.
Sue your client.
It's okay. It's like cable TV.
That's right.
I still think that the fascinating part is that you know that you're capped. If that makes sense. So that 3rd year, I think a lot of people, like a traditional arm, people are scared to death about they're getting in at this price point and they don't really know or understand fully where. I mean, yeah, they can look at the document and understand, but they don't. But when you can tell them, look, you're in at 7%. It's not going above that. The first couple of years, you get a little break. I think that, well, really, it's a big break. But I think that makes it infinitely more marketable because they know they're protected. They're not any worse than where everyone else is right now, ever.
I think people, broadly speaking, have been bamboozled by a lot of things in the world.
Yeah.
And so let me share this story. When I was working at the bank, I would see people coming in that had bought arms in the past. And I'm talking about 15, 18 years ago. Now we went into a period of time like 2008 when Obama took over. Rates were, they loaded them down to nothing. So these people came in and they're like, well, my arm's expiring. What am I going to be paying? 1.7%. They're like, well, why would I refinance that at 3%? Well, it's fixed. And I'm like, the page is, it's 1.7%. Well, it's variable. Okay.
Yeah.
How about when I get to 3%, when it goes up to 3%, then I'll come talk to you. Well, then the fix will be 4%. But it's hard to argue with somebody that's paying 1.7% on a mortgage.
Yeah.
That they should do something. So the arm was really had a bad connotation, but it ended up to be the right thing to do. And those people saved a fortune.
Well, in some cases, but it also led to a lot of the issue that we saw in 08. I mean, not all of it. I mean, a lot of the issue in 08 was people getting more money than what their house was worth or not having to put anything down to get into it. And then they would compound it with doing a 3-in-1 arm with no conception of where it was going to go. And the fact that they were doing new homes and had no
Well, yeah, and you had a surplus of inventory.
Yeah, I mean,
We don't have that now.
no, we don't right now.
Well, there's some factor of luck that I think most people don't understand. Like, as an example, all the guys that retired in Lilly in the 90s, and they had their entire 401k in Lilly stock.
Yeah.
Now, any advisor would tell you that's a huge mistake. But by chance, through the late 90s and early 2000s, Lilly stock doubled and split. So these guys went from having $100,000 to having $800,000 in a decade.
Yeah.
And then diversified and protected the money. So how do you tell that guy? I mean, he obviously, most people probably lucked into that. They weren't.
What's my old saying? Just because it worked
It wasn't a good decision.
doesn't mean it's right.
So a lot of these armed people, I'm sure that was a tool used to get them into a house they shouldn't have bought, or, if I was a devious person, I would do a bunch of arms so that I had a pipeline for 3 years down the road to refinance all these deals.
Yeah. Well,
But if you can make a case,
is that though devious?
not devious.
That's not really devious. I mean, if you put someone in a 3-1 arm, and because we're all believing the interest rates will be lower in 3 years, the fact that you get to refi them would save them money. You're actually doing them a benefit in 3 years, and you're doing them a benefit now because the arm's lower. So it's really not devious. I mean, you're setting yourself up for 2 closings, but you are actually helping that person.
Empirically, if it makes sense, it makes sense. The biggest loan I ever sold when I was in the banking world, it was over $1 million loan. I did the math on the fixed, and I did the math on the 7-1 arm. And the 7-1 arm, even though there was a little rate savings, because of the way arms are worked out for the payment, they actually reduce the principal by a larger amount than a 30-year fix.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. So if he did a 7-1 arm and then did another 7-1 arm at 2% higher, he would have been in better shape because the principal was reduced by so much.
Yeah.
At the end of 7 years, the second 7 years. So he did a 7-1 arm.
And that goes to what he was saying. I mean, that relationship and you actually showing them the numbers, because it would be hard to convince somebody just blindly, oh, the 7-1 arm's a better deal.
Arm was scary because those builders that were out wherever they were, Hartland Cross, and they were, oh, you can get a house for $700
Of course, you know what's at the end of an arm? The middle finger, which is usually what most people are thinking. So